All right. Cool. So a couple of us who are already here had our introductions, but if you are not or you're watching this recording later, my name is Emma. This is a basic class for strength and flex. It's a buildable class, so I'm just going to do a little bit of a spiel here so that you guys know what you're in for, and then we'll start getting into the movements. So the purpose of it is we're going to kind of slowly unwind patterns. If you have taken Touch for Health, it's basically the workout equivalent of a reactive muscle protocol. So we're going to unwind patterns and then start activating muscles that are not sort of pulling their weight or doing their job to progressively pull the body into balance. It starts out very gentle, so you might not leave feeling like, yeah, I just did a workout. You might leave feeling a little bit, taller, a little bit longer, a little bit. I think generally people feel like they feel more parts of their body, which kind of gets into the concept of any good training that you're doing anywhere is going to build proprioception. So I might go off on some random point or fairly regularly about proprioception. If you find that information interesting, there may be more in-depth classes solely based on proprioception taught by someone else later on. And then, so the purpose of it is we are going to have a focus on building strength, but we're going to work up to that really slowly so that we're not building strength on a foundation that's already unbalanced, therefore like creating a more difficult knot for ourselves to unravel over time. So that's kind of the goal of this. A couple of things to kind of be aware of before we get in. Because it's a class that's focused on that, I'm going to ask you to think about a lot of things or feel a lot of things at the same time. Don't be overwhelmed. It's designed in part so that it is too much for you to do all at once right now. And then over time, you can kind of discover slowly, okay, I am able to hold this position with those three different parts doing, what I'm telling them to, because one, I can feel them, and two, they're starting to sit a little bit more naturally where they're supposed to be. And the last thing I want to kind of talk about is there's going to be a couple of things that we will push ourselves a little bit harder on the strength side. This is definitely, again, I'm going to use Touch for Health isms because we're a kinesiology college, why not? There is an element of self-responsibility model here. So please, for instance, we'll do a series of push-ups at one point. It is designed to be a little bit too much at first. So you're welcome to always put your knees down on the ground or do a half push-up or just hold a plank, really modify it in any way that feels good to you right now. You can also do negative, so just go down and then sit up to come up. Anything like that. And the one thing that's in almost every class that I'm going to teach as well is going to be a 2-minute plank, which I think is a wonderful thing to do because as time passes, you're going to notice how much easier that is to hold. And again, with that movement, we're going to, cut ourselves some slack. Don't beat yourself up. Put your knees down if you have to, come down if you have to. If you start feeling pain, typically in your low back, rest and just notice and come back when you. So that's my sort of intro spiel done. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to sit in any position that you want, find a position that's comfortable for you, and take a bit of an inventory of your body. So close your eyes and breathe. We're not going to do this for very long, but we're just going to feel, where am I feeling excessive tension? Where in my body feels really open? If I find a spot that kind of hurts or is tense and I sit with it, is there a specific emotion that comes up there or a specific thought or mental state? And just kind of scan through your whole body. I'm going to shut my mouth here in a moment and let you guys all do that. you're ready, go ahead and slowly open your eyes and come back. We're going to start with a couple of really, really gentle releases in some sort of important typical problem areas for people. So the first one that I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you put your fist, it looks a little bit weird, against the side of your head. And you're going to make sure that your neck is really long. We're not crunched. We're in sort of a weird position like this and directly in line with our head. So without our arm angled up or down, we're going to put about 7 pounds of pressure into our head and our head back into our hands. So I'm not using my fist to push my head off axis. What I'm doing is I'm stacking my vertebrae long, and then I'm giving my head a little bit of resistance. And we're going to hold that there for about 15 seconds. So focusing on your neck being nice and long and your head meeting the pressure of your hand. Make sure that you're breathing. And release. And give your head a nice little turn. And then start with the other side, same exact thing. So it's a good amount of pressure, but you shouldn't feel like you're shaking. It should be kind of just before that point. And this is great if you find that you just have a lot of neck tension. It releases it up pretty quick, particularly if you do a couple of cycles of it. And again, if you notice that there's a specific spot that's painful or feels uncomfortable while you're doing this, try and sort of feel around that. Obviously, let go if that's what's necessary. But if it doesn't feel like you need to stop, see if you can feel what's happening around that pain, because then you can kind of engage in the process of unraveling it actively. Release. And give your head a little turn. We're going to do the same thing going forward. So you can do this kind of however you want. I sort of turn my hands back, like the back of my hands towards my head, because that feels less awkward. You can also do it lying down. For this one, again, it's super important that we're staying long. We're not pushing into our hands like this. And we're just going to go ahead and sit there and push for just a moment. Release. And the same thing on the back of our head. So nice long neck. If anything, our chin is going to be slightly tucked in and down rather than back and extended. And we're going to push almost from our chin backwards into our hands. And my hands are a little bit closer to the top of my head rather than in the midline. They're kind of, yeah. So that we're getting a bit of a stretch with that activation, a really nice stretch. And release. Now we're going to do 2 things for our lower back and core. So I'm going to try and tilt my screen down. What we're going to do is we're going to lay down like this. We're going to do a bit of a lower back release. So your knees are going to be hip width apart. And you're just going to start by laying down naturally and feeling where we are. What we're going to do is we're going to find what's called neutral spine, which is just a workout terminology for having a long, lengthened spine that's supported by your core. So typically most people are going to have a lot of tension in their lower back. We're going to start by kind of releasing that a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to move into that tension. So we're going to push our back into a pretty intense arch. And then we're going to rock all the way into a full pelvic tilt in the other direction. And we're going to do that at the full extreme of that movement 5 times. Always trying to find ways to incorporate your breath into the movement. I'm not going to direct you as to specifically how. It's more of an exploration of how can I breathe as I move. And then once we've done 5 of those, we're going to progressively make the extremity of that movement smaller, trying to kind of slowly bring ourselves to the center of that movement. So I'm just kind of cutting it in half and in half and half until I have quite a small movement. And I'm looking for what feels to me the closest thing to this. And now once we're here, we're going to work on activating our transverse abdominis. So stay where you are. I'm going to sit up. Your rectus abdominis, if you can see, are the sort of glory muscles right here. So they're the six-pack muscles that people want. And then there are the oblique abdominals, which aid in side crunchy, stuffy like that. And we've got the transverse abdominis, which is basically like a full corset running from our back around to our front. And it's a really important muscle for stability that's very hard to find and very hard to exercise. So what we're going to do is we're going to take two fingers and we're going to push them into our belly about 1.5 inches above our hip bone, and 2 inches on either side of our belly button is about where we're going. And what you're going to do is as you're breathing, so we're not right on the sort of six-pack muscles, we're sort of to the side of them. As you're breathing, you're going to find a way to basically just push your fingers out of your belly using your belly muscles while keeping your back nice and long. So we're not crunching in and we're not sucking. We're just kind of meeting our fingers. It's a very weird feeling. If you can't find it right now, don't worry about that too much. And then once we have that, we're going to go ahead and release. And we're just going to do a really simple breathing exercise. And this is an exercise that you can do laying down like we are now, which is the best way to start to find these muscles. You can also do it sitting and you can do it standing. So you can do it sort of wherever you are. And all this muscle is, all this exercise is a bit of a visualization. So again, the muscle attaches back here at our spine and wraps all the way around. So what we're going to do is I kind of like to put a hand on my belly and imagine that I'm basically pulling corset strings. I'm going to breathe in deeply. And as I breathe out, I'm going to feel that tighten from my spine first and wrap all the way around to the front of me as I pull those imaginary corset strings up, okay? So you can do it with or without that hand. And we're going to do a few of these. It's a little bit weird, but it's pretty important. If you have a question or you're having a hard time, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask. And again, with this contraction, our body is going to feel actually like it's getting longer rather than like it's getting shorter, as it would with sort of a traditional ab workout. About 5 more. Okay. You can go ahead and sit back up. We're going to take a brief moment just after those few exercises. Your body should feel quite a bit different. So kind of take a second again, do a little bit of an inventory. My head's chopped off. And just kind of feel, my head is still chopped off. Feel if anything has shifted at all, or feel if anything is just a little bit different than it was before. And then we're going to move into starting to use those muscles so that we can actively strengthen them. But that's a combination of a few little stabilizer exercises for the main sort of midline of our body and just a little bit of a muscle awakening and engagement. Okay, so take a second. I'm going to get us set up for the next one. going to be briefer than the previous one. But yeah, give yourself a wiggle, see what's going on. Nothing like a good wiggle test to tell you. Beautiful. And now we're going to start with a bit of a strengthening exercise, specifically geared towards that transverse abdominis muscle. So again, one of the main things that I'm going to have you focusing on almost the entire time in this class is being very long through your spine. So for this exercise, you're going to feel like the very base of your tailbone and the top of your head are constantly growing, lengthening away from each other. And everything is also going to have nice sort of heavy contact with the ground, aside from the one part that we're moving, okay? So what you're gonna do is you're gonna lay back down, just as you were. I'm gonna take this off so that I'm more visible in movement. We're gonna find that neutral spine, give yourself a bit of a wiggle, start feeling your hips move away from the top of your head. And then we're going to lift both of our legs into a tabletop position. And once we're here, again, we're going to take one quick second to make sure that our hips are moving away, because it's very easy for our lower back to release. So we're keeping a fair amount of contact of our back into the ground. We're not over pressing it, but we're making sure that there's contact there. And then from here, all we're going to do is we're going to lift our knees up. So we're pushing from the very lower part of our core, and it's going to move all the way through our core, to lift our knees up. Trying not to move the rest of our feet. We want to keep these 90-degree angles that we've got going on here, and we're just going to lift. This is quite difficult. It looks like a very simple movement, but to just lift your knees up from the base is quite challenging. So we're going to do about 30 of those. And we're just trying to feel it. So we're not getting on ourselves for it not being perfect or for the movement being really small or any of that. If your body moves a little bit more than you wanted it to, it's totally fine. But we're trying to really just find that muscle and see if we can feel it. Notice as well if any other muscles sort of start to fire a little bit too heavily. For instance, a typical one in here is going to be your hip flexors. So if you feel kind of a burning happening from around your hip bones to around the top of your thighs, then that means your hip flexors are probably kicking in a little bit more than we want them to. It's good just to notice it. And from here, we're going to put our feet down and give our hips a little bit of a wiggle, a little bit of a rest, everything out. And we're going to build on that exercise very, very slightly. If you want, you can go ahead and do that lower back release again. Not all the way down, just do a few. Then we're going to go ahead and find that position one more time. And this time, we're going to lift our hips up and hold there. And then we're going to try and drop one foot down and touch the ground, and then bring it back up. The key to this is that we're not changing the angle of our knee at all. So we're going to drop the whole leg down with a 90-degree angle and lift it back up. I find it's helpful to put a hand on your belly so that you can really focus on that pulling up movement coming from your core rather than from your hip flexor. A little bit of hip flexor engagement here is going to be pretty normal. That's going to be something that most people will experience. But eventually the goal is to have the movement be really predominantly powered by the core. And then find as much relaxation as you can in the rest of your body. Try and allow your breath to be as free and natural as possible. I'm trying to continue thinking about that lengthening motion from the top of your head to the bottom of your hips. More. And then go ahead and release. So this is an exercise that we're going to come back to all the time because it's wonderful. And it really helps kind of engage a muscle that we're not that familiar with. I would say the most important exercise in that series is actually the breathing one in order to find the transverse abdominis. And then over time, that will naturally be incorporated into the rest of your core exercises just by that muscle sort of being awake and ready to do its job. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of I call it a serratus push-up. So your serratus is right over here on the side of your body, and it's pretty helpful in shoulder stabilization and sort of general posture. It's something that's really overlooked a lot of the time. Instead of getting too into the nitty-gritty details, we're just going to go ahead and find that shape. I'm going to tilt my camera up so you can see me better again. So we're going to find this shape. This one can be done in 3 different ways. It can be done standing up with your palms on a wall. It can be done in a full press-up position, and it can be done in this sort of doggy position. We're going to start here. So the first thing you're going to do is make sure that your knees are underneath your hips and that your hands are underneath your shoulders. And then you're going to find that lengthening shape from the top of your head to the bottom of your hips again. As soon as you do that, you should feel your core engage slightly. Once you lengthen your body, your core will kind of kick in a little bit. And then once we're here, what we're going to do is we're going to press our full palm into the ground. We're going to rotate our elbows. My elbows are kind of gross. They pop out a lot, but it makes it easy for you to see. Rotate until our elbows are facing forward. We're going to make sure that our head is neutral, and then we're going to push through our shoulders, not until our back is round, but just until our back is flat. And if you feel a little bit of engagement right here underneath your arm, that means that you're doing it right. Turning out your elbows is really important to find that engagement. So once you're there, we're just going to hold this for about 30 seconds. This is our kind of little wake up call to that muscle. We're saying, all right, we're about to do some stuff that involves the shoulder joint. Please join the party. And then check in if you have a bit of a shape change in your body somewhere else that might need correcting. Just see if you can tweak it a little bit. And then relax. Wonderful. And we're going to lay down on our belly. And for this one, you're going to put your face down on the ground. You're going to lift your shoulders up off of the ground with your shoulders down and away from your ears. And then you're going to pull your arms back down behind your head, like you're making the goal shape, okay? So we're going to do about 10 of those. At the bottom of that goal, we're really trying to pinch our elbows towards each other on the midline of the back. And keep reminding yourself to pull your shoulders down away from your ears, even when you're in the extended position in front of you. Excellent. And when you're done, go ahead and sit back up to let me know that you're done. Wonderful. And now we're going to throw in a bit of a chest stretch. So you're going to make 90-degree angles with your arm. 90, 90. Put it down flat next to you on the ground. Turn your head away from your arm and then bring your body over. So I'm going to use this arm to kind of press a little bit and just sort of push as much as feels comfortable to you. The chest side, I'm having a hard time coming up with an appropriate way to say that, that is the same as the arm that's extended. I'm going to think about pushing forward and away from my arm so that I'm really opening up inside of that shoulder and the pec muscles, getting them to calm down a bit. This is another really common sort of spot where a lot of tension is held. And breathe into it. You can move in it a little bit. This is not like a make a perfect shape and stay there. This is definitely a bit of an exploration of where your attention is. And go ahead and switch to the other side. Wonderful. And now we're going to get into some side planks. So this is one of those exercises that I'm going to have you sort of modify yourself to what feels good for you. A couple different ways to do a side plank. The first one is on your hand, like this. Okay. And we're trying to, in all of these shapes, make sure that we're in one strong line and we don't have any kind of weird kinks or breaks in our form. The other way that we can do this is on our elbow. So if you have a lot of shoulder stability problems, this would be a good goal, but it might not be good to jump into it right away today, okay? But you're welcome to do it either way. You can do it here, or you can do it here, okay? And we're gonna go ahead, I'm gonna set a timer, and we're gonna hold that for about, I'm going to say a minute. We're going to hold it for a minute on each side. And again, just sort of like go with yourself. So if you're feeling like you need to come down, then come down. But that's what we're going to do. All right, everyone ready? I know you can't actually tell me, so 3, 2, 1, go. And again, because we're holding shapes here, really be checking in with your body the whole time, because as you start to fatigue, you're going to experience different parts of your body that disengage or re-engage as to what your particular patterns or chains are, okay? So make sure that both front and back, you're really in alignment, and then side to side, you are as much as possible. And then also check in with twisting. So I, for instance, have my chest turned down a little bit right now and my hips turned up. So I'm going to go ahead and bring them both back into each other. And we only have about 15 more seconds. And that's that. We're going to go ahead and do the other side, which I'm going to do facing this way this time. And whenever you're ready, here we go. If you're doing it on your hand, make sure that your shoulder is right above your wrist. If you're doing it on your elbow, make sure that your shoulder is right above your elbow. And really check in with the front to back alignment. So this is something that we're really trying to pull into line. Very often, our hips are going to be slightly back, and we actually have to just push our pelvis forward a little bit. One of the kind of common ones. 20 more seconds, doing great. Five, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Relax. And go ahead and do a little child's pose. Oh, feel your
spine becoming longer. It is wonderful. Okay, and now is when we're going to do a little bit of a push-up sequence. So again, I'm going to reiterate, please feel free to do your push-ups with your knees on the ground. It's a fair number of push-ups, and we're going to do them in a couple of different ways, just to kind of get different things online and rolling. So we start to sort of get those shoulders set back where we want them a little bit. And we're going to go ahead and start with 10 push-ups with our elbows next to our body. So these are considered tricep push-ups, okay? We're going to focus on our spine being really long the whole time, even if we're on our knees, and our shoulder blades being sort of neutral here. What's going to happen to most of us, myself included, I need to do more push-ups, is that we're going to over round like this as we start to get fatigued. I encourage you, and I'm going to do this as well today. This is not about, I'm going to be super strong. I'm going to pound out all of these exercises and do it perfectly. We're really focusing on this first day on the stability, because we're building a foundation so that we can build strength up on that later if you decide you want to come back and take more classes. So really find that position, that neutral, strong position that you feel through your whole back. And then once that starts to wobble, go ahead and drop to your knees and finish the set, okay? I promise they'll come easier and easier as we go. So we're gonna start 10 tricep push-ups, elbows in. Good. At your own pace. Breathing out on the way up, extremely helpful. Sweet. All right, second iteration of push-up is the wide arm push-up. So this is more about the chest. You're gonna have a little bit more sort of natural rounding in this one, but still try and keep those back muscles sort of as a part of the equation. So really put quite a bit of focus there. And as well in your breath if you can. So breathing in on the way down, out on the way up, almost as if your breath is propelling the world away from you. And here we go. I'm going to breathe quite loudly for demonstrative purposes. Yay! And the last push-up is quite weird, and it's a bit of a stability challenge. So ultimately what you're going to be trying to do is do a push-up with your hands in the shape of a diamond. I'm going to show you the shape that we're going to do that in first, okay? If it feels weird and wobbly, bring your hands out as wide as you need while still being narrow enough to be challenging. And then progressively over time, you can start to bring them in. But we're going to do this in kind of what would be a downward dog position in yoga. So I'm going to find an even line between my shoulders and my head. And I'm going to create my diamond, and I'm going to try and push down and touch my head more or less in the center of my diamond. And we're going to do 10 of those. Go down as far as you can, as far as feels comfortable. Try and really stay in that line rather than breaking it and making a different shape. So you're not going to be looking at your hands. You're going to be looking more sort of through your legs and behind you. And when you're done, you can go ahead and one more time, stretch out your chest just a little bit. Same way we did before. And we're going to revisit my favorite exercise from the beginning of the class, which is this one. We're going to find our tabletop. We're going to go ahead and push our knees upward. We're going to do this about 30 times. Focusing on bringing your tailbone away from the top of your head every time you push your knees up. And pushing up and holding and dropping one leg at a time. Also trying to really focus on keeping those 90-degree angles, not changing the angle too much. And relax. And now we move on to stretching hip flexors. So we make lunge bucks. Again, all of our 90-degree angles because we love them. They're wonderful. We're going to make sure that both of our hips are pointing forwards in front of us. And I'm going to think again about pressing this knee down into the ground and lifting the whole rest of my body up and away from that knee, from the very top of my head. Once I've done that, I'm going to start tilting my pelvis forward so that I'm pushing into this space in the front of my hip, creating a stretch in those hip flexors. If you can't quite feel that, you can go ahead and lean a little bit more into it, but my guess is that most of us will feel it pretty much right away. And then go ahead and explore that. So if you want to give a little bit of a side bend or a bit of a wiggle to find a spot that has a bit more tension, feel free. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to straighten our back leg out behind us. So it's still bent and touching the ground, but we're no longer focusing on that 90-degree angle. Same thing, we're going to push in to this space of the hip. Enough that it feels a little bit uncomfortable, but not so much that it's ow, ow, oh my God, ow. You can experiment with lifting your chest up or laying your chest down, depending on what feels good to you. You can take both of our hands and put them on the inside of our leg. And we're just going to take this knee and we're going to let it fall out to the side and then bring it back in. So it's looking like this. Meow. Meow. And we're going to switch to the other side. Yep, exactly. So 90-degree angles, lunge box. Pushing into that hip. Extend that back leg back more. And push into. Excellent. And we lay back down. Now, we're going to very, very slowly move into a glute bridge. So you're going to lay down with your knees bent, again, feet about hip width apart. Take your fingertips to measure the distance of how far your heels should be. So the tip of your middle finger should just sort of rest on the back of your heel, and that's a good distance for your feet to be away from the rest of your body. And once we're here, we're going to start slowly rolling our whole body up into a glute bridge, one vertebra at a time. So the first one that we do is going to be quite slow. Very good. And we want to get all the way up until our hips are very open. And then we're going to come all the way back down. As I'm doing this, I'm thinking about the outsides of my hips all the way down my legs, rooting into the ground. So that the engagement is coming very strongly from these sort of outer muscles rather than from my inner thighs. And we want to feel that rooting happening on 3 points of our foot. 1, 2, 3. So the two sides of our foot and the bottom of our heel. Some of us have probably heard that before, but it's worth mentioning. And we're going to do about 20 of these, so 15 more. And every time I'm coming up and every time I'm coming down, I'm trying to roll down one vertebrae at a time. So I'm starting at the top and rolling all the way down until my tailbone touches last. Tailbone leaves first, and then it rolls all the way up my spine. Excellent, and relax. And we're going to go ahead and do a froggy stretch. So you're pretty much just going to, on your knees, do more or less what looks like a middle split shape, but without your legs straightened. You can go ahead and elbows or chest on the floor, lie down, however feels good to you. And give yourself a little bit of a rock forward and a rock back in that. And go ahead and release. And we're going to come back into that shape that we did for the serratus push-up. So knees under hips, shoulders above wrists, lengthening the spine. And we're going to do, I'm going to take my legs straight out to the side. I'm going to lift it, bring it all the way behind me, and then tap it on the other side of my body. So I'm crossing it across the midline. And then I'm bringing it all the way back around. And as I'm doing this, I'm going to have to bend my knee, which you're welcome to bend your knee if it starts to feel really heavy. I just happen to not have space right now. But as we're doing this, we're going to focus on making sure that our back isn't changing shape too much. So we're going to find that stable, neutral shape. I'm going to do my other leg so you can kind of see, and then try and leave our back there with our core engaged as we move from that hip. So we're going to do 15 on each side. Straight leg, bent leg, whatever makes you happy. And try and feel what's happening in your core and around your hip as you do that. Do you have to really tilt your hips to do that? Is there a lot more weight in one hand than in the other? Can you balance that weight out between both hands as you do this movement? If you only feel it in the back, can you bring more engagement into your core to power that movement? I have completely lost count due to toss. And the time has come for the 2-minute plank. Oh yes, joyous day. It's wonderful. We're all so excited. We can barely contain ourselves. So I'm going to face front because I have a yoga mat this way, and that floor happens to be very slippery, which is going to make this much harder for me. But I'm going to go ahead and show you on the side real quick a couple of things that we're looking out for and trying to feel in our own body, okay? So a plank, it turns out no matter how strong you are, you can make as hard or as easy as you want to be. So you can make a plank extraordinarily challenging, even if you are very, very stacked. So if it's easy, make it harder on yourself. But for most of us, what we're going to be focusing on is we're going to be focusing on finding those shapes. So my shoulders are going to be above my elbows. I don't want to be too round or too concave. So I'm really trying to find that flatness and the wideness in my shoulders. So my shoulders are moving out from each other in opposite directions, but not allowing my chest to side. And then I'm thinking again about that length throughout my whole back without letting my lower back dip at all. If this happens, I recommend putting your knees down because that can be pretty rough on the lower back. So we're trying to find that line that's as flat as possible without being rounded. So a lot of times when people start to fatigue and they want to overcorrect to be flat, they actually round in the opposite direction. So again, I just recommend putting your knees on the ground. 2 minutes is a substantial amount of time for a plank, but it's a really good barometer because you'll really be able to see yourself getting stronger. So We begin in 3, 2, and 1. This is a very mentally active exercise. So really checking in with those different parts of your body as you're doing it. If you can't find a specific area that has a break in form, just continually focus on lengthening, either the lengthening of the shoulders away from each other or the lengthening of the head away from the hips. Really, any place in your body that you can create more space, the better. Places where we feel that space is where we have a lot of proprioceptive capacity, because nothing is jammed on top of each other so that the signals are being lost. If there's a lot of space, we can feel a lot. If we can feel a lot, we can move a lot. It's great. We're about halfway done. Thirty more seconds. Ten more seconds. And child's pose. Moving me into the shade if I can. You keep doing what you're doing. It's very hot here. Okay, wonderful. So that more or less concludes our little quickie rundown. We're going to finish with one of my favorite exercises for increasing body awareness. It's really simple. We're going to do a relatively quick version, but you can do this very slowly. And if you do it very slowly, again, you're going to feel more and more and more. So I call this spinal articulation, because that's more or less what it is. And it's really simple. You're going to find a comfortable place to sit. I like to do it this way because that's how I've always done it. And you're just going to breathe. And from the very base of your spine, from your sacrum, these are going to be small movements, almost microscopic. In many ways, it's much more mental than it is physical. But what we're going to do is we're going to move our spine in different ways. So you can do side to side, one vertebra at a time, front to back, or circles all the way up and all the way back down, okay? So we're gonna start with side to side because that one's the easiest one for me to feel. And what you're gonna feel is we're gonna start from the very base of the tailbone. We're gonna move up one vertebra at a time at your own pace. And as we're moving up, once you get to a vertebra, you might find that you have a particular one that everything around it feels really stuck. So the movement is quite small. I'm going to start in my middle back so you guys can see it. So I'm finding one vertebra and I'm trying to push around it, kind of like a bow. When it's very low, it's really subtle. You can't really see anything happening. I'm trying to keep the rest of my body really in line. So I'm driving the movement. The movement is in my mind coming from that vertebra, not from the muscles or anything around it. Obviously, that's not how it works, but mentally it's very helpful. And then as we're working our way up the body, what we're going to think about is the rest of the structure sort of falling and hanging gently off of the spine. So again, another place where you're going to find that this is probably pretty interesting is around the middle of your chest. You can hang out there for a while. And as you're doing it, close your eyes and allow your collarbones, your ribs, all of those parts of your body to kind of fall until they're hanging off of the spine. So we're going to start from the very bottom. That's just a little sort of explanation with the side-to-side movement. This is completely at your own pace, but again, for your knowledge, you can do it side to side, front to back, and little circles. The circles are my absolute favorite, just in the way that they feel and what they do for the body. Another place, again, that can also actually be quite challenging is the last vertebrae above the head. And I definitely encourage you to kind of hang out in those areas that are harder for longer. If it feels quite easy, do a couple movements and then move on. And go ahead, you do you. Really focusing on that length the whole time and really focusing on the breath. Feel the movement more in your spine than anywhere else. So if you start to notice your awareness drifting outwards towards the side of your body where one would see the movement, bring it back into the very center and feel only the piece that you are trying to move. If you're a visual, visualize the spine and see that one vertebrae pushing out or pulling out from one side to the other. I'm going to take another couple minutes just to kind of explore this on our own. So working all the way up and then back down. If you don't get all the way through, that's absolutely fine. I definitely encourage you to try this on your own as well. I know it feels quite silly. And you'll probably find that as you're doing it and sort of getting into that space, your movements actually become quite a bit smaller. That is a good thing. Go with it. And with your body again, see if anything moves, if anything feels a little bit different. There's maybe a little bit of space somewhere. Notice the sort of emotional climate of your body. Does that feel different at all? Do you feel like you're sitting up a little bit taller or straighter, a little bit more confident? to any parts of your body that didn't feel so good before, kind of open up. And then also the parts of your body that are still kind of hurting a little bit and don't feel exactly how you want them to. And just kind of bring your attention to them. That'd be okay. But it doesn't feel exactly how you want right now. And kind of mentally soothe that piece. Let it be okay for it to swim. And that's our class. So, thank you for joining me.